All right, thank you guys. Wow. It is good to be back. It's a little weird, but really good. I'm going to tell you a little story as I start here. So, almost a year ago, the Brewers came out to visit us in Rhode Island, and Don was our guest preacher. We invited him to preach at our church back there, and I got up to introduce him, and I just started crying. I couldn't even get the introduction. I was like crying. And then Don came up and made fun of me for 10 minutes. So he chose not to introduce me this morning because he would probably cry up here. He didn't want me to get the satisfaction of that revenge. So it is really good to be with you guys. We miss you guys so much. It's awesome to see familiar faces. I'm going to do my best to keep it together up here. Can't make any promises. You can turn to Luke 19. I want to share with you a passage and a story in Scripture that's been really encouraging to me recently, and my hope is that it'll be encouraging to you too. I'm just going to call the message, Jesus, Friend of Sinners. In Luke 19, 1 through 10, there's this probably familiar to many of you, this story of Jesus' encounter with Zacchaeus. And maybe before I read it, when you hear the name Zacchaeus, what comes to mind for you guys when you hear that name? Anything? The sycamore tree. Is someone, the song, the lyrics? Okay, did someone say the wee little man? Who knows the Zacchaeus song? Anyone? We'll figure out who the church folks are in here. They're real, okay, yeah. The wee little man. That's right. So let's read this passage and familiarize ourselves again with Zacchaeus and see what we have to learn and be encouraged by here, right? Luke 19, 1 through 10. He, that is Jesus, entered Jericho and was passing through, and there was a man called by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was and was unable because of the crowd, for he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree in order to see him, for he was about to pass through that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for today I must stay at your house. And he hurried and came down and received him gladly. When they saw it, they all began to grumble, saying, he has gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, half my possessions I will give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will give back 4 times as much. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. So before we look at this story and break it down a little bit, if you would just participate with me in a little thought experiment here, all right? I'm going to give you a list of attributes, and I want you to help me decide between the options I give you which attribute or quality is more desirable, okay? So a little list here, starting with first, tall or short? What is typically more desirable? Short. Robert said short. I'm not going to say any more about that because I don't want Robert to beat me up. He's like one of my good friends. No more about that. Most of us would say tall. Intelligent or unintelligent? Intelligent. Attractive or unattractive? Attractive.
Seahawks or Patriots?
Patriots. Short again. He keeps coming back around to short. Musically talented or like can't carry a tune to save your life? What would you rather? Musically talented, right? Okay. Are you with me? If you could choose your own qualities and attributes, would you choose all of the good ones? Like, are you with me on that? Would we like choose all the good ones? Tall, attractive, musically talented. But we don't get to choose, do we? So in life, we live with like a mix. Maybe we have 1 or 2 strengths and a lot of weaknesses, or maybe we have, more. none of us are Tom Brady, who has all of them, right, Tim? But although I gotta say, I gotta say this. When he started broadcasting, even though, and you all know, I love Tom Brady, I just missed that era of time so much, okay? But when he started broadcasting, this is gonna sound weird, but I was kind of rooting for him to fail, because I'm like, he can't be good at everything. And in the beginning, he was terrible, and I kind of enjoyed that. But now he's pretty good at it. He's kind of found his way with that too. But anyway, okay, so we don't get to pick, so we get a mix. And are you with me on this? Don't we kind of like figure out how to play to our strengths? We try to kind of cover for our weaknesses and lean into the strengths in order to like make our way through life, navigate through life. Now, the reason if we could have picked, which we don't get to, but if we could have picked, the reason we would pick all the good ones, well, why don't you tell me why? Why would we pick all the good ones? Why would we want all the good attributes? Go ahead. Because I want to be better. And what comes with that? What else would come with that? Life would be easier. Okay, so like, I know you're all very spiritual, good church people this morning, but like, why, like, let's fill this out just for fun for a minute. Why would it be easier? What else could you get in life? Approval of other people. People would love me. I get a better job. Respect. Fame. The stuff that comes with that. The almighty dollar, right? Go ahead, more? Any others? We could go on and on of all the things that we could have a better chance of getting if we had all the qualities. But sorry to bring us back down to reality, that's not the case, right? So we live with the mix and we learn to try to like play to our strengths, and we all do that. And when we read this story about Zacchaeus, we encounter a guy who is compensating for his weaknesses and playing to his strengths. Okay, so let's just look at verses 1 through 3, and you help me identify some characteristics of Zacchaeus here. So again, look at it. Jesus entered Jericho. He's passing through. There's a man called Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was and was unable because of the crowd, for he was small in stature. So in the first 3 verses, we encounter some of his qualities, most of which are negative. So he's short, which, at that time, and probably it's kind of, again, generally considered a less desirable quality. He's got that. He's a chief tax collector. Most of you know tax collectors, what they were known for. These were Jewish people who were considered disloyal traitors because they were working for the Roman government. And they were also thieves because they would take advantage of people, manipulate people, and take from them. They would add their own little fees and things just to like gouge people for their own benefit, to stick more money in their own pocket. Okay, so we learn these things about him. On the positive side, we learn that he's rich, isn't he? He's rich. And as a tax collector, he's not just like your run-of-the-mill tax collector. What kind of tax collector is he? He's a chief tax collector. He's at the top, right? So evidently, he's pretty good at it. It's the way it works in this world. You don't get to a chief anything position unless you're good, right? So he's become good at it. He's achieved some things, and he's a chief tax collector. It says in verse 4 that he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree in order to see Jesus, for Jesus was passing by that way. Well, it's probably a strong personality, and he's kind of like eager to see Jesus, and he's got to figure out how. So he runs in this crowd of people, all this commotion. If you look at the earlier chapters, there's a lot going on, a lot of buzz, a lot of people coming around Jesus. He's a miracle worker, and he's teaching, and there's a lot going on, okay? And Zacchaeus, when he comes into Jericho here, Zacchaeus like, I got to see this guy. So he's running, and he climbs up into a tree, which is interesting to think of a grown man climbing a tree. That's what he does, which speaks to how much he really was desperate to see Christ. If we kind of like try to imagine what would life have been like for Zacchaeus, I mean, we're meeting him here for the first time, but if you try to kind of like go back in your mind, what would life have been for this guy? And I know we're reading between the lines a little bit, but growing up, I mean, maybe he was, picked on, bullied, despised perhaps by the other kids. Maybe developed an edge because of that. Maybe was jaded. And living with his own weaknesses and deficiencies, he's sort of determined within himself, you know what, I'm going to make something of myself. I'm going to get good at something. And he got good at this. Good enough to become a chief tax collector and good enough to become rich. So this is our guy. And Jesus is coming into town and he wants to see him. So he runs on ahead and, in a way, kind of like embarrasses himself, climbing up into this tree in order to see him. Verse 5 says, when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for today I must stay at your house. So again, there's all these people there, right? Like big crowd of people there to see Jesus. And with all those people, Jesus looks up into the tree, makes eye contact with Zacchaeus, calls him by name, and says, I'm going to hang out with you today. I can imagine, and we see some evidence of this later, I can imagine that if you were there in that crowd and you were thinking, who would be like the last person I would want to spend any time with? Would probably be Zacchaeus. And yet Jesus calls him by name and says, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to spend some time with you. Very significant that Jesus calls him by name. It is. And throughout the Bible, in fact, even this morning we were talking about God calling out to Moses. God calls his people by name, which reveals his knowledge of his people, his commitment to his people. Yesterday, with Juliana going to the prom with her friends, David Bragg and I went by where they were taking pictures. And as we're approaching the steps, and we're going to meet up with them there, we're approaching the steps, and I look up and I see several families that I remember from Black Hills High School. And the way I'm wired, I'm kind of an extroverted guy, so right away, I'm like, oh, like this little happy feeling, oh, cool, like this one and that one. I'm sort of seeing faces as we're approaching. And then all of a sudden, like this dread kicks in because I realize, oh man, I saw like two people. I couldn't remember their names. You know what that's like? So I'm like happy, this is total tangent for a second, but I think you'll appreciate this. As I'm standing back there this morning, I don't know why this occurred to me. I was thinking through a little bit of what I was going to be talking about. As I said, I'm an extroverted guy. If I were like a dog, I would be probably like a Labrador, like happy, right? And that occurred to me. And then what occurred to me is the Brewers have a friendly Labrador, or at least mixed part Labrador, right? They basically replaced me with a Labrador. But then this is really sophisticated. See if you can come with me on this. So I have a German Shepherd. German Shepherds are courageous, loyal. Jen is right with me. A little bit mean. We replaced the Brewers with a German Shepherd. All right, so I'm going up the stairs. We're back with me, Capitol, going up the stairs. See, these families don't know the names. The point I'm trying to make here for our sermon is God knows your name. God knows your name. So he says, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down. I got to stay at your house. It's amazing in the original language. It's like, it's necessary for me to stay at your house. Later in the text, we're going to see, he says, Jesus, he came to seek and save the lost. And for him to seek and to save the lost, it is necessary for him to abide with his people. He says, I'm going to stay at your house. And that word stay is abide, remain. In one sense, we know Jesus didn't stay with them very long. He couldn't have. He had all sorts of other things to do. He had his cross to go to. But he was with them for a time. And yet, when you look throughout Scripture and you see this concept of remain, abide, you over and over again see where God talks about abiding with his people. That he remains with us. He stays with us. One of my favorite verses is in Isaiah 57, verse 15. It says, "Thus says the high and exalted one who lives forever, whose name is holy. I dwell in a high and holy place, and also with the contrite and lowly of spirit, in order to revive the spirit of the lowly and to revive the heart of the contrite." You might be sitting here this morning with a whole mix of emotions or whatever. I mean, hopefully happy to see me and Juliana, but maybe some other things, maybe some sadness, maybe some discouragement, maybe parts of your life are mixed up and frustrating. Over and over again, Scripture reveals to us, and the story we're looking at this morning tells us, God knows your name, God has mercy on you, and God offers himself to you. To remain with you, which you and I need so much. So I feel like this is a good time for a Rocky illustration. Bringing back all the feels this morning. As my friends here know, some of my favorite movies, the Rocky movies. Now, I don't think I've ever used this one here before. So hopefully, even for those of you who've heard of a lot of them, this is hopefully fresh. But Rocky 2, okay? In Rocky 1, he loses the final fight to Apollo Creed there, okay? Or I should say it's a tie. I should say it's a tie technically, okay? So in Rocky 2, he has another chance to fight in a rematch to fight Apollo Creed, and all that's developing, and he's realizing this big opportunity. But in the middle of that, Adrian becomes sick and ends up hospitalized. So Rocky's now got this like quandary on his hands because he knows this big fight, but the love of his life is down, and so he's all distracted and rattled, and he's there in the hospital, and time goes by, day after day, and he's just completely like stuck, can't seem to get out of the funk that he's in with what's going on with Adrian, even though, you know, she's likely to be okay. Well, there's this scene where he's sitting in the chapel, and Mickey, his trainer, comes in. And Mickey says, "Hey, Rock, here's the thing. You have the chance of a lifetime here. You've got a shot at the greatest title in the world." He says, like, "Look, I know you're going through a lot right now, but this guy you're going to face, I mean, he wants to kill you. He wants to humiliate you. And I know you're better than that, and I know you're worth more than that." And Rock, I mean, I don't know if your brain's working right now real good, but, I mean, it's coming up soon. And you're not ready. And he says, "But listen, if you're just gonna stay here, if you're just gonna blow it, I'll stay here with you. And I'll blow it with you." Zacchaeus was blowing it. You're blowing it. I'm blowing it. And Jesus is a friend of people who are blowing it. God offers to stay with, to remain with people who are blowing it. He's a friend of sinners. As a friend of those who left to ourselves, according to Romans 5, we are enemies of God. We have, naturally speaking, a hostility toward God. Most of us don't think of it that way. We don't think of ourselves as enemies of God. We might not realize that. But the Bible tells us that's true. In fact, in James chapter 4, this is interesting. In James chapter 4, we're told that every time we're at conflict with other people, do you ever have any conflict with anybody else? I'm sure you don't. Yeah, right. Probably constant, right? All you got to do is drive down the road. You got your siblings. You get somebody in the supermarket that rubs you the wrong way or cuts you in line or whatever. Like we're in constant conflict, aren't we? I mean, let's just be honest. We're in conflict all the time. Even just within ourselves. You can be driving down the street and picturing somebody as you're driving. Oh, yeah, I'm going to say, when I see him again, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that, right? I know, yeah, again, you can't relate to that at all, can you? Yeah, you can. So conflict all the time. Well, James 4 says, what's the source of all this? Where does that come from? And he says the source is your desires, that you want stuff. You want your own way, you want stuff, and other people get in the way of that. And then it goes on to say, that friendship with the world, right there in that same context, that is a manifestation of our affection for, our friendship with this place. And when someone gets in the way of that, it's this. And James there is saying, and that is, even though we experience it this way, horizontally, it actually is vertical in nature. That's an evidence and a manifestation of our fallen side that's at odds with our Maker. So we befriend the world, and God befriends us, those who would otherwise be his enemies. We see that here with Zacchaeus. We see that in our own lives. Let's continue on here. The story, verse 6. And he hurried and came down, and he received Jesus gladly. Zacchaeus was grasping something of the significance of this as Jesus offers him friendship. He experiences gladness. The word for gladness here could be translated rejoicing. Does anyone have a different Bible that translates it differently? Any other terms there? What do you see besides gladly? Is there anything else? Joyfully. Okay, joyfully. Okay. The word is related to another word in the original language, which is the word for grace. He has some sense that he is receiving grace, that he's being offered grace, and his reaction is gladness. He is happy with this offer of friendship from Jesus to him personally. And the contrast is striking in verse 7. Look at verse 7. And when they saw it, they all began to grumble, saying, "He has gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." The worst guy in the community is overwhelmed by gladness in that Jesus has offered him friendship, and the onlookers there are grumbling and complaining. And the idea of even grumbling and complaining, like this emphatic way that it's written there, it's like the crowd is just rumbling with complaints. To where they're like, what? I mean, they were all excited about what Jesus is doing in their area. There's all this good buzz about him. He's healing people. In the earlier chapter 18, he healed a guy who was blind. He gave him his sight back. There's all this great stuff going on. They're all excited. Hooray, like this rabbi, this Messiah is here. And all of a sudden, like, wait, what? Why is he hanging out with that guy? That guy's a sinner. Like, that's the worst guy. Why would you cut? Like, we wanted you to come and somebody needs to put that guy in his place finally. Like, we thought you were going to come and correct this guy. And you're offering him friendship and you're going to go to his house with him. And so they're grumbling and complaining. That they went from excitement to boo hiss. This isn't what we wanted. This isn't what is appropriate. This guy's a sinner. Doesn't Jesus know who he is? Doesn't he know his reputation? How he uses people? He's a traitor. Doesn't he know that? Well, look, the next verse, verse 8. Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, half my possessions I will give to the poor, and if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I'll give it back 4 times as much." It's actually, it's like he stood up. Some of your translations might say he stood up. It's kind of like this. It's like there's all that commotion, okay? All those people, and they're murmuring, complaining, and talking about, "I can't believe that Jesus would pick that guy. Doesn't make any sense." So all the grumbling, all the complaining, and it's kind of like Zacchaeus says, "Hey guys, I can hear you. So he stopped, he stood, and he said, look, and there's, again, some sense of awareness. And I say some sense for an important reason, you'll see in a moment. But some sense of awareness that he was unworthy of Jesus' friendship, and some sense of awareness that when all these grumblers and complainers were doing what they were doing, that they had a point. There must have been some sense that, all right, well, okay, so he stands up and says, all right, look, if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I'll give it back 4 times as much. Well, I'll half my possessions I'll give to the poor. Now I say some sense, and this is, I want you to catch this, okay? And we were talking about this in Sunday school this morning. So easy to miss this. But even in Zacchaeus' repentance that's happening here, he's still not like fully aware of himself. And we see that because he says, if I have defrauded anyone of anything. Do you notice that? It's like, well, if I've done anything, if there's any truth in these accusations, then I'm sorry. It says, I will, half my possessions I'll give to the poor. This is fascinating. In Luke 18, Jesus is interacting with the rich young ruler. And he says there, hey, if you want to follow me, then go sell how many of your possessions? Do you remember? All of your possessions. And give to the poor and come follow me. And here we are in Luke 19, and Zacchaeus is like, all right, I'm getting this a little bit. He's excited a little bit about Jesus extending friendship to him. And he's like, if I've taken anything from anyone, I'll make that right. I'll even half my possessions. So in normal human fashion, it's like he's even holding back a little bit. But that's not the point. The point is, Jesus is here to rescue him. Even with his blinders and deficiencies and unworthiness, even as the worst of the worst, Jesus is here to rescue him, to save him. Because that's what Christ does. That's what God does. That's what he's always done. So it says in verses 9 and 10, Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house because he too is a son of Abraham. Now that would have been scandalous too, to hear, hey, this is one of my people. In their minds, he had disqualified himself from being considered a son of Abraham. He's not a true Jew anymore. He's turned on his people. He's disloyal. And yet Jesus says, nope, he's one of mine. And salvation has come to him in that God, we could say salvation is God rescuing and befriending and abiding with sinners. That's what salvation is. And he is here to save. Verse 10, for the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost. He goes after the worst person, the least qualified from a human perspective. He offers him and grants him friendship and salvation. Jesus is going from here not long after this, relatively speaking. He's going to his cross. Jesus, who lived a life of utter selflessness, is going to die for selfish, greedy people, to take upon himself the curse, to extend to us God's forgiveness and covering, cleansing. He's a Savior. So as we begin to kind of bring all this together, let me ask you this question. Do you know anyone like Zacchaeus? Do you know anyone like Zacchaeus who has some very obvious weaknesses, obvious flaws, but has learned to play to their strengths and even to be good at it and to kind of manipulate or take advantage of or exploit other people? Do you know anyone like that who's become pretty good at this, and you kind of can observe that, wow, yeah, they're good at getting that, at proving themselves and pleasing themselves? I mean, do you know anyone like that? Can you picture in your mind someone? I would bet you can probably picture someone in your mind. Is it a sibling? Is it a coworker? Is it someone at school? Is it you? Is it you? I would guess, for most of us, probably didn't think of ourselves. I knew where I was going with that, and I didn't even think of myself. So, our tendency is not to see ourselves as we really are. We sort of like give ourselves a little too much credit, maybe a lot too much credit. We overlook, we see ourselves as victims. The reality is we all have ways of angling, strategizing. Not long ago, Jill came home from school, and she said, and let me just set it up this way. So in the terms of the ways that people do that, I mean, some people are charming and good-looking or very humorous or whatever, and so they use that to their advantage, and they're able to get what they want that way, and that's, again, very obvious. And don't we have the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of like the victim, people who play the victim card and who even leverage their weakness just to get what they want. So Jill comes home from school and says, yeah, we're just struggling. We had this conversation in the teacher's room about this little girl who's like, I think 4th grade or 5th grade. But throughout the day, she'll just like start baby talking. Weird baby talk, especially when she gets in trouble. It's just like, so the teacher's talking like, what is that about? And why is she doing that? And and Jill and I were saying, at some point, that must have worked for her. And maybe it's working for her on the regular. And so that then in school translates to just like, this is what that person does to get their way. We all have our versions of that. We're all in this rough and tumble world. We're trying to get through it. We're trying to get a little bit, prove ourselves a bit, please ourselves a bit. I mean, is that too much to ask? I mean, we're just kind of like trying to survive here. We all have our weaknesses and flaws, and we don't like to accept those, and we're all like miserable in our self-absorption, aren't we? And the constant frustration and disappointment. And then the friction that we experience with other people as we're scrapping and fighting to try to get our way. Because we're limited and small, and we don't like being limited and small. We want to be big and have a lot. That's what we prefer. So we just walk along fighting. Making our way, struggling, times overwhelmed by the burdens, times feeling the dark, hopeless thoughts, the frustration and irritation with the people who have hurt us the most. I read a book. I'm just going a little off script here. How are we doing on time? What are you guys used to? It's going on noon, so just a little bit longer. This is off script, but it's just interesting to me. So I read a book a few years ago, secular authors on the New York Times bestseller list. It's called Humankind, A Hopeful History. And in the book, the author is trying to argue for basically the good of mankind. And it's really popular. It could be like, you could almost say this is almost going to be like the Bible for secular culture. It's very humanistic, as the title indicates, Humankind, A Hopeful History. And one of the points the author makes is, well, hey, people are good, and here's the evidence of that. What about the people who run into burning buildings to save people? What about those first responders or military members or people like that? And so he's saying, hey, these are evidences of the goodness of people. And in my normal fashion, I'm thinking through it, and I'm okay, how would I counter argue that? And this comes to my mind, wait a minute. The term anonymity is significant. It's one thing to go in and save people in a distressed situation. But there is the factor of anonymity, where they're going to people they don't know to rescue them. Could be all sorts of motives for that. There's anonymity. There's also limitation in that once the job is done, and some of our, Mr. Bragg could tell you this in terms of being a first responder. Professionally, he could tell you this. But once the job is done, you leave and you go on to the next job. You don't stay with that person. You just go and you keep going. So there's the fact of anonymity, not knowing, and not staying. So what if the burning building is filled with your enemies? What if the burning building is filled with ex-boyfriends or girlfriends, the neighbor that drives you crazy, the kid who bullied you growing up in school? What if it's filled with your enemies? Do you rush in there and save them and stay with them? No, you don't. And I don't either. Jesus is that kind of rescuer. That's the marvel, the wonder of the gospel. Okay, to bring it back full circle, that we've been talking about throughout the message here, he's the one. Listen, so we talked about, we got limited attributes, we got some good ones maybe, we try to play to those, we have some, maybe a whole lot of bad ones, we wish we could have all the good ones, but we don't, and so we do the best we can with that, and we scrap our way and selfishly just fighting through, and in Jesus we see the perfect combination of all perfect attributes and qualities, and unlike us, he uses his perfection not to take, but to give. Not to be served, but to serve. And he lays his life down. He gives not just half. He gives everything. Right down to the last drop of blood. He gives to rescue his enemies, to rescue you, to rescue me, to save us. And then he doesn't just save us and cut us loose. But he says, I'm with you. I'm abiding with you forever. And that is your rescue, that God says, I'm with you. That's the wonder of the gospel. It's still blowing me away. It's what God taught me for 15 years here, still teaching me. And I get to share with other people and to know that you guys are on a regular basis reminding one another of that same truth, of how good, how kind, how merciful our God is. How he offers himself to people like Zacchaeus, people like us, right? A friend of sinners. People who are blowing it. People who, in our honest moments, realize, yeah, we're kind of miserable, selfish people most of the time. And he says, I'm with you. Christ offering for us his life, his death, his resurrection, all to help us to know, to hear, to believe that God loves us. God forgives us. And God is with us. He's a friend of sinners.